On the list.
Yeah. But like to send a commission.
Well, yeah. To propose amendments. That's what
Heard of it, can't see where it is. It's that kind of here. It's just a little north or west of that. Oh, right next to this. I couldn't believe that. Wow. It's 7 hours. I think it's like 3 or 4 days. Yeah, whatever. It is.
We should have a list of like 8 or 10 concrete things. We want setbacks to be this. We want maximum vacancy. So there's several tries. Didn't do very good last year. And we have to lay it out.
Yeah, I'm getting old.
It's going to be a meeting of itself, and I said that safety's going to be huge. Safety will be huge. Based on what's been brought to the table here, I mean, are we going to do groundwater testing?
I just think we need specific. We could talk for 3 hours and not have any specifics.
It works. Property value
It's still fun, but it's tiring.
I think this crowd's expecting that.
Well, I have 2 granddaughters.
Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
They wouldn't get a credit call earlier. Okay. He's trying to call me back. I told him.
Junior high.
Oh, they're really
Ed, I may need a ride home tonight. My car's at the tire store, and I told him to put the keys over the sun visor. I didn't want him to lock it.
Oh.
They locked it.
Locked out. Yeah, the sheriff's department right here having Slim Jimmits. They get in it.
I'm too good to my own, but you understand that.
I really just been fun.
Power door lock is
It might take fun, others it's amazing. Yes. But it could be like tonight. I just did 60 of them, and I'm doing it myself.
Yes.
Much like
You guys generously agreed to give us our 75. You want chicken?
Truly, that would help. Just to get out, I pitched tomorrow. I coached the travel team for Mississippi. So one of the season's over. I still got them out. I pitched to them. I can be like, I'm going to the ball back to me real hard.
I had never guy hits a shot. I'm great. Well, I catch these. And it was slicing away. I just get away. Just slicing
All right, we'll bring this meeting to order. September 9th, 2024, Area Planning Commission will bring the meeting to order. If you would, please stand and join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Katie?
Bothwell, Caudill,
Here.
Hicks,
Here.
McWhirk,
Here.
Nevers,
Here?
Pearson,
Here.
Poland, Richmond, here, Schultz,
Here.
Stewart,
Here.
Atkins.
Yes. Okay, as far as old business, we don't have any old business unless the commission members have something they'd like to add to the agenda. Okay, hearing none. New business, commission members, you have a copy for your review, not that we're going to take any action tonight, but it is a copy of the Roberts Rules of Order, the basics for small boards. And this was presented to the BZA at the last meeting, and the BZA made some comments about it, and if I'm correct, they approved that, and I believe that Mr. Glickfield is planning to write a resolution
Correct.
for that to be added to their rules and procedures. And I think what this does, it just basically makes things a little simpler in regard to Robert's Rules of Order. In our current rules and procedures, it does state that we are to follow Robert's Rules of Orders. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not really pro Robert's Rules of Orders because I don't know that I know that much about them. It's a very difficult process. So this is the possibility of simplifying that a little bit. So what I would ask you to do is to take a look at this, and then in our October meeting, we will take some discussion on it, and if the commission chooses to adopt this, I think Mr. Glickfer will be happy to write a resolution for our rules and procedures also. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, moving on to new business item 4-1, solar ordinance amendment considerations. This has come about based on the APC's resolution 1-2024 that was passed on July 29th of 2024, where the Area Planning Commission made the decision to implement from the area-wide zoning ordinance, section 153-075D, which gives the Planning Commission the ability to review amendments to any ordinances, and this is in regard to the current solar ordinance that we have. I will make note that the commissioners had given the APC a resolution for us to consider some items that they wanted us to take a look at. I think there is a possibility of other items that we need or want to consider looking at. So based on a discussion of the last meeting, I came up with a list of amendment considerations. And this list was taken from discussion that has been received from the public to the APC. It came from the review of some ordinances from local counties, and just concerns that we've heard about some of the things related to solar. I believe the public has a copy of this list, is that correct? Okay. So I guess, commission members, I am open to any suggestions that you have in regard to how we want to approach this. It's not a public hearing session. I don't know that I want to do that yet. I definitely want to give the public the opportunity to respond. We can either talk about these one by one, answer any questions that we may come up with, ask any questions we may need to ask, and seek, answers to those at some point, and then give the public the opportunity to respond. I'm open to that. I really don't have a format established for it. Any suggestions, commission members?
One at a time might be a little slow. Maybe do like 6 or 8 at a time. And I mean, if we do all of them and that's for public comment, that might be kind of wild.
I think the idea of the list was to make sure that we're staying focused on an item rather than just generally going after them. So, I mean, we can start with the first one and see if there's comments from the commission members. Jim?
Yes, a question if it would first, and I wasn't here when the original ordinance was going, was being, I guess, developed and discussed. And are each of these items on this list, are they items that are referred to in wording that's in the current ordinance now?
Might be.
It may not be then. So some of these could be not even in that current.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, there are some of these items that, now you guys help me, okay? This is my recall of the ordinance, that different entities of the county had input or the responsibility of coming up with. For instance, the Soil and Water Board, SWC, I believe, they, as I understand it, have the responsibility of ground cover, erosion control, and screening. It's my understanding that the Drainage Board has a piece of the drainage component of it. And I do know that one of the requests that the commissioners made was that the easement for county maintained drains be doubled based on what the state requirement is, so rather than it be 75 feet on each side of the ditch, they're asking for 150 feet because farmers believe that they're going to need that much if they need to go in and redo or maintain that county ditch, that they're going to need that additional space. They're going to need that protection from that. So that doesn't, and I plan personally to meet with the Soil Water Board. In fact, that meeting is this coming Thursday to kind of let them know that we're in the process of considering, some changes, and we value their input greatly in regard to those areas that they may have special interest in. And I plan to do that the same with the Drainage Board. I think that meeting's next week. So. Thoughts?
We can start at the top and go one by one.
All right. High impact zone. My understanding of what that is if we were to determine or establish an area that we wanted solar to be considered to be developed in. I know that there's been questions. Why aren't we looking at vacant parking lots? Why aren't we looking at rooftops of large structures or parking lots or those sort of things? I mean, if we chose to elect some of those areas, that could fall into the category of a high impact zone, where we are designating areas of preference for solar development.
So you're saying then that that's not in the ordinance right now?
No, that was in an adjoining county's ordinance.
I think that's important.
Okay.
What happens if, a farmer and a solar company want to make one, but it's not in that zone? Would this make it illegal, or is just extra steps for the application, or what's the teeth to or does this just streamline if you're in a high impact zone? What would that look like?
I mean, I guess that would depend on how we wanted to define it, whether we wanted to make it exclusive, that only solar was to be developed in high impact zones in the county, or whether we wanted to entertain other areas. Other questions, thoughts, commission members?
You mentioned this is something that was in an adjoining county's ordinance. How did they address it? What was their use of this area, this topic?
don't know that I'm prepared to answer that right now, but that is something that we can research and have available when we meet again. For the sake of time, I know it's in here. Or maybe we have somebody in the audience that would like to respond to that. Okay?
Do I have to get up or do you want me?
Yeah, we're gonna do this formally. We're not gonna speak from our seats tonight. That's too,
Understood. And I don't know Marcus Queensberry for what. Anyway, I'm Andy Ellis. And when I look at high impact, I think we ought to encourage brownfield development. And that would be a good way to define it because there are industrial sites, dumps, places around our community which are not just underdeveloped, they're in disrepair. Those would be great opportunities for those to be seized and actually put into service, and would not require, I don't think, rezoning or anything like that. It may, I mean, I'm not a zoning expert, but that's what I would define as a high impact area, is what we want to, as a community, encourage development, as opposed to taking away economic farm ground and places that we already have great economic tear down where people are benefiting from it. So that's my thoughts on high impact as far as development, because I think there's a role for solar rooftops, as you mentioned, but there's underutilized properties that we don't lose what we've already got. So that would be my thoughts.
okay.
Thank you.
Jim, to answer your question, I found it here. It says,
I apologize. I thought I had to shut up.
non-commercial and small commercial can be approved by the planning office based on information provided in the improvement location permit in use at the time. Medium-scale commercial projects must be approved for a special use by the Board of Zoning Appeals prior to issuing a building permit. Large-scale commercial projects must be on property zoned high-impact district and forward to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use petition to be heard at a public hearing. Any project except for a non-commercial requires a pre-project meeting with the executive director. Special filing requires will be provided at the time. So I think this particular county decided that any large-scale commercial solar is going to be developed on a high-impact area.
Can you share which county that is, please?
That would be Madison County. I'm going to ask you to come up, Trina. We're not going to talk from our seats. Out of respect, I answered that, but we're not going to have this. Okay.
No, that's fine. That was my only question.
Okay.
Happy to answer anything you may have, though.
Nope. Anyone else like to speak to the high impact zone?
I just had a quick thing. Some of those areas you're talking about around.
Okay, can I ask you to come up, please?
Sure.
Sorry, Ed. We're going to maintain order to the best of my ability.
Greg Yarder, Van Buren. Some of those areas you're talking about around town on top of buildings and maybe in industrial areas are probably not, I'd have to ask the experts, but they're probably not a viable place because there's nowhere to connect. That's the big issue on my property, why they want it pretty badly. It's a half a mile from the power generation or the terminal, the power station, and it's easy to connect. Some of these other places around town, yeah, it may be a great place for great sunshine and making power, but there's nowhere to connect to. Mm-hmm. I don't know. They may be able to connect into something, I don't know, but how did you define high impact? What is a high impact area?
I don't know that I can answer that.
I can't. I mean, I don't have a clue.
I'm from what I just read, I'm assuming that a large scale industrial solar would be classified into a high impact area. That's where they
Or
made
this
it.
large scale, 3 acres, 5 acres, 60 acres. I seen a thing on people worried about glare. There's solar panels right at the end of the runway at Indianapolis Airport. I'm pretty sure there's not a problem with glare off of solar panels. I've never caught any driving down the road all across the country. When I see them, there's never any glare coming off of them. And they put them right there on the airport property. So I'm pretty sure there's not an issue with glare.
Thank you.
That's all I got to say right now.
Thank you. Ed?
Ed Hartman. The high impact zone, as I understand it, is a special zone that the Area Plan Commission would set aside for industrial solar farms. It's a plan. You guys would be in charge of a plan. It wouldn't just be random, I want to lease land, so I sign up, anywhere, all over the county. People got letters, a lot of letters went out, people signed up. That's not a plan. That's not your plan. We'd like to have a plan in this county. We wouldn't develop some other large industrial site without thinking about where would be a good place for that in the county. So that's really what I think the high impact zone is all about. So it's something that you would plan and set aside, do a rezoning, and then if solar wanted to develop, they could.
Which sounds like that's part of the county's comprehensive plan as well, right? They kind of go together, the dovetailing
Yeah,
there.
it would kind of go into the comprehensive plan.
It makes sense.
They're also working on it.
That, which would make sense, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Randy, could I ask you a quick question? Sure. In all the ordinances, and I've read a few, but I haven't read, I've got a lot of friends in my industry that are sending me their ordinances. Is this particular topic defined in any of those ordinances? Because I think before we try to figure out a plan, we need to have some idea of what we're talking about. So was there a definition in any of the ordinances that you read?
That ordinance I just referenced, what I read was what that implies. Now, whether it's deeper within that ordinance somewhere, I don't know. I think what Ed stated is accurate. It's implying that rather than the county just be open for anywhere that a lease can be acquired, that the county makes the decision as to where it wants solar to potentially be developed. That's.
Normally when we're trying to adopt a new fire building code, there's a specific chapter that deals nothing but definitions. So if this is supposed to be a definition, then we need to define what that definition is going to be.
David, could we define that? Can we choose to decide what that means?
Yes, I think we can. If I may offer a suggestion, maybe help move things along. My guess would be if you discussed every one of these issues tonight, we might be here till midnight if we took public comment.
We're only going to be here till 7:45, and however far we get, how far we get.
What I'm wondering, I looked at this list, and having heard many public hearings, I broke them down into 3 categories with a potential for a 4th, and then I highlighted 5 areas which I think need some major discussion. And I'm wondering if it might be wise to maybe have at least 3 public hearings and because I group these into what I call pre, post, and then mechanical operational issues, and then a couple are procedural. And then I highlighted the CAPS issue, the watershed studies, the setbacks, the decommissioning, and then the property value guarantees as major policy issues, which I think are going to involve quite a bit more discussion than maybe the rest of it. But I had 10 pre, 6 post, 7 mechanical, and then 2 procedural. So it seems if you broke it down along those, it would be somewhat even, and then had those 5 major areas, maybe address a couple of them at the each of the public hearing meetings. And that way it breaks those up also.
So looking at this list, based on your comments, what are you considering the need for a public hearing?
Well, obviously, I think they all should be discussed, but I think just hearing public input, I think the caps issue is a major issue, farmland caps. I think the watershed issues, the public has a lot of concern about the water quality where these might be. I think setbacks was also discussed in great detail. I think the decommissioning, in other words, what happens if they leave, is a major issue. And finally, I think the public was very concerned about property value guarantees. I think those issues are above and beyond discussion-wise some of the other issues, is like, for example, height of ground-mounted solar panels. To me, that's kind of I call it an operational mechanical issue, same with electrical components. And then I had several which were in other words, need to be addressed before or during the application process. I'll be happy to break those down if you'd like me to.
Sure. What about safety? I think safety, I've heard a lot of stuff concerning safety, whether we do water testing, whether we've got.
Well, I had that to say I had that. I mean, that to me is included in when I was talking about the watershed, the water quality issues, safety.
Okay.
That's just a suggestion. Obviously, it's up to you.
Any comments, commission members, in regard to Mr. Glenfield's proposal?
Organizing in some manner is important, I think. So that's a one way of doing that, I'd say. But we need to definitely organize in some kind of manner.
I kind of agree with Mr. Glickfield. The things that I think are like most pressing, and we also some of the things that the commissioners, when they sent their request to us, were the caps, the setbacks, and then to me, the role of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Like some of these things, like non-participating landowner notification, if it's a special exception, if it goes to the BZA, that's already going to be taken care of through the BZA. So that, to me, that's kind of a question that'll determine some of these other things.
And I think tax abatements, that's pretty much a council jurisdiction issue. And then the rule of the Board of Zoning Appeals is that's going to be a statutory issue that's pretty much going to be taken care of once this is put in place. They have a specific role that they play, and that role is going to be there no matter what.
Realizing that it's not currently in the ordinance that the Board of Zoning Appeals has any input.
Right.
But if we're talking about ordinance amendments, I mean, I understand it's statutory, but if we're talking about what we as a body want to recommend as amendments to the ordinance, that seems to be taken.
Well, I would think the ordinance would have specific requirements, and then to alter those requirements, the board, you would have to get a variance or a use exception, something along those lines, based on what the requirements are. If you want to deviate from many of these requirements that could be put into the ordinance. For example, if you wanted a setback variance, if you wanted to ask for a setback, that would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Once it's established in the ordinance, if you wanted to variance from that.
If the ordinance allows the Board of Zoning Appeals to have input, which the current ordinance, as my understanding, does not.
Well, yeah, then obviously I think that needs to be part of the ordinance.
All right, that's where I was headed.
Yeah, I got you, yeah, okay. I'm with you on that, sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Jackie Sheets. Okay, talking about the brown ground areas and the rooftops and stuff, the power that would be generated would stay right there, and there would be less stress on the actual grid itself. There was issues about hooking up. Well, it would just stay like if a factory had it on their rooftop, they get the power, and their power would not, be affecting the grid. They generate their own stuff. So if it's on an old factory site, whoever's closest to it, they get the power, and it stays there. It's not gonna have to be hooked up 500 miles away to a grid and go who knows where. So I think it would be more self-sufficient if our areas, have their own power and not be on the grid.
All right, any other discussion, high impact? Now, there was some concern in regard to non-participating landowner notification. We've heard that from the public quite a bit in regard to, we feel like the leases should have been filed in the recorder's office based on the Indiana code requirement for that to happen. And that didn't happen. It was the efforts of some local folks who went up and tried to determine where those leases were. So I guess, do we feel like the ordinance should require some notification of where the land's been leased prior to the development?
I mean, again, I kind of don't want to talk about this unless we decide if we want it, like, if we would recommend that it requires special exception or not, because if, I mean, I've heard people say that it should be by special exception, then that requires notification, correct, Mr. Hartman, to request a special exception, is that only for variance?
Well, what we're talking about by,
Sorry.
what we're talking about by non-participation notification is that within 45 days or some set time, soon after a property is leased, the sign goes up on that property stating that it's been leased, who the owners are, who the developers are, things like that. What we had was a lot of secrecy in the county. And what we'd like to have is more transparency, know what's going on. It's just generally a better way to do things rather than to sneak around, And so this notification process would be pretty simple. You put a sign up on the land, any street that abuts that land would have a sign on it. And you would have information that you could then use to find out more about it. And, as far as, leases were supposed to be recorded in the recorder's office within 45 days after being signed. That's state law. It's also state law that the recorder records them correctly and that they are put in the miscellaneous file and not just thrown in with everything else. So if someone wants to go see them, it's a very easy process. You go up and ask for that miscellaneous file and they should all be there. That's also state law. It wasn't done in this county. And that just doesn't look good for us. It wasn't transparent and it looked like secret, a secret behind the backs of our people. This was being accomplished. So.
Next question, if we're, which to me makes sense that just non-participating neighbors, I guess, owners, are made aware of a lease, shouldn't they be made aware prior to the lease being done? What good is it to notify them after the lease is already accomplished? I'm just asking that question. It just seems like you need to know before it's finalized. If not, why do you even need to know? It's after the fact.
I agree with that. I believe that there wasn't sufficient notification that, industrial development was coming near.
Generally, if we have some kind of an issue with something, you notify the surrounding area before it's approved, before the public hearings happen, before it's approved. That way you have a chance to have your input in before the decision's made. So it seems like that would happen before.
Okay. Any comments about that, commission members?
That's the way it surely should be. Yeah. I've never been notified that they're going to put it in there beside me, even yet today.
So pre-notice before lease.
Seems like, that's what makes sense to me. If it's after the fact, it's gone at that point.
It's useless. Yeah, before you might have some input, maybe.
You may get mad afterwards, but it's too late.
Yeah. Don't do much good.
All right, any other comments, commission members?
Mr. President, may I ask another question procedurally?
Yes.
Is it anticipated potentially that before that, I guess, each application project, maybe over each project, over a certain size, have the application reviewed by the office and then have a public hearing on that? Because that's where notice to landowners is gonna come in, where they have an opportunity to come in and hear. And number one, is that done? I think I see where you were going with the BZA now. Should that be done through the BZA or should that be done through APC?
Thoughts, Jim?
And on the size. I mean, if this is a large site, then it would have to go through rezoning and things of that nature. But, I mean, for the smaller ones, I'm not 100% sure. I haven't read all the ordinances and everything, Randy, so I'm just.
Well, we're rolling into our next item, which would be the solar development types. I think our current ordinance, yes. No, come on up, Danny.
Dennis Carter, Paramount. This discussion about notification to non-landowners, most of these contracts, these farmers have already signed them. Where do we stand? All of that ground out around my house, Lasseter's already signed it up.
I would assume it's grandfathered in if the leases are already made, regardless of the ordinance change.
Well, the ordinance is currently under review, so they're gonna have to follow the ordinance that's developed. Just because they've signed contracts, I mean, that doesn't mean too much until the ordinance is finally addressed, which is happening.
That's my question, because these guys have already signed leases and they're supposedly locked in. They can't get out of them if they want out of them, or most of them I've heard don't want out of them. But that's my question. If they're already signed up and in, do we have any recourse? That's all.
I don't think there's any applications been submitted yet, has there?
No.
Yeah.
So an application could be denied based on input.
Correct.
Roy, what, are you wanting to speak?
Yes.
Which item would you like to speak to?
I just heard one so far, sorry I was late. So,
Okay.
I guess as far as notification, pre-notification, I mean, this is gonna impact, the Google data centers and everything else that obviously buy their background before they, announce any projects or anything. So is that your intent also? I mean, you're really gonna impact your economic development area, I would think. So, just a thought, as long as it applies to everything, not just solar.
Well, we're talking about a solar ordinance.
Okay, why wouldn't it apply to everything?
I guess it would depend on what the other ordinances might say and where those other developments fall under an ordinance.
I'm missing why they would be different as far as the notification of the neighbor.
I think we have different ordinances for different situations. We have different zoning for different situations. We have a zoning table that has different zoning requirements based on what's going on within that particular area.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to roll into solar development types.
Randy?
Yes.
May I?
Come to the podium, please. State your name, please.
Michael Duke. Want me to sign in too?
Yes, please.
Okay. Maybe other people can catch up. Forgive me if I sound naive, and I'm speaking historically, but at one time, in reference to notification, at one time, maybe the ordinances have, or regulations have changed, but parallel to this, I would say, I could cite that in the past, when a farmer was intending to spread be it waste product on one of his fields as fertilizer, prior to that, a operator would have been required to notify all surrounding landowners or property owners adjacent to the acreage that he was going to work at, either spreading or injecting, the waste products into the ground as fertilizer. Just offer that as a simile in the way of comparison to prior notification for any development projects.
Well, I don't think there's any question that we should make a strong effort to notify residents who may be impacted by anything that's going on. I will refer to a meeting that I attended last week in regard to Spectrum hanging their cable wires on telephone poles out in my area and other areas where I&M AEP admitted that they did not consult with the landowners in regard to the impact that the height of those wires were going to have with farmers and farmers' ability to unload their grain into their semis from roadways. And AEP admitted that they should have made an effort to contact every landowner that could potentially be impacted in order to make sure that those clearances or those heights were suitable, that it did not impact that farmer's ability to do what they had been done in the past. In fact, AEP has stated that they will classify farms as small businesses, which is a different set of criteria and rules for them to come in and hang wires to the poles in order to assure that that impact isn't there. So, I don't think there's any strong argument against the fact that we need to keep people aware of what changes may impact them. Something to share, Mr. Glancy?
If I may.
Please.
Talking about the high impact, all the three subjects we've hit so far, but talking about notifications. And we've talked about sizes, right? And there's a bigger picture, right? That, and this is what we've come to know, is we've seen the smaller solar fields coming up around the schools, and it's like, oh, this is what we've got, right? This is what we're talking about. Or the site at Gas City, oh, it's back, or we don't really see it, right? But on the notification, and it comes back to the plan part of it, if it gets so large that it changes the lifestyle, and go back to the comprehensive plan, right? That we're going to eat up so many acres that we're going to change the substance of the county. I think that's why we need a plan to begin with. And not necessarily say limit of acreage, but let's not change our fundamentals of our community. I think that's what part of a lot of us are talking about, is changing the fundamentals of our community with too many acres and what that will do. Okay, it's not just all the safety issues, all these other things, but the notification of, is it 20 acres here, 20 acres there? Yeah, we can live with that, and we'll compensate the people around, so on and so forth. When you're talking about thousands and thousands of acres, and they just keep wanting more, that's when we need to think about some other fundamental things about our community. Thank you.
So in regard to solar development types, I believe that there's different criteria based on the size of the solar, and I think that's going to be important that be in the ordinance. Anybody opposed to that? How those are broken down? Any comments to that?
Yeah, I think it's more than just size. I think, the citizen was talking about, it's on a roof or in a backyard and it's just consumed by that company. That's a fundamental difference between commercial and non-commercial. There's different rules. To me, commercial means generated with the purpose of selling to the grid or to customers of electricity versus intended to be used by generators. So like the universities, that would be non-commercial. They generate power. They might incidentally sell some excess to the grid, but it's primarily used. We could even come up with a percentage if we wanted to, but the difference doesn't seem like we would want to regulate people from using the energy themselves on their own little property. What we're more concerned about is the big ones who are intending to sell to the grid. To me, that's the difference between commercial and non-commercial.
So there's no question we would need different criteria based on the size and the application of solar power.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Anybody disagree with that before I open to the public commission members? Everybody agree with that? Okay. Mr. Yerger.
I've got a couple of issues that I've heard so far. What's the difference between 80 acres of corn and 80 acres of glass surrounded by a fence and those hideaway tall trees where it'll just look like a tree farm? It'll look like 80 acres of tree farm instead of 80 acres of corn or whatever. That's one point. I had the setback from the waterways does not need to be 150 feet. Is that what number you said you was considering going to, 150? That's crazy. The government's already paying some farmers for watershed protection to leave a barrier, and I think that's 50 feet. 75 would be, if they can't operate a trackhoe to get the trees and the trash out of the creek in a 75-foot, border, there's a problem. Besides, on some of these waterways, like my place, hasn't been cleaned, the creek hasn't been cleaned out in 50 years. And when it does get cleaned, they should leave my side with growth on it for environmental reasons, for, animals and soil erosion, because the way where my place ends up at is bordering 500 and the creek is bordering 500. And the last time they did it about 40 years ago, 45 years ago, it caused massive erosion, massive. That just went into the creek and went to the reservoir, I reckon. As far as water testing, these solar panels are solids. You got silicon and glass and electrical wires. There's not going to be much contamination of any kind other than maybe some weed control, but some folks are going to do bees on their property or sheep for grazing, let them graze it. Right now, farming, you blow a hydraulic line out there on the combine or whatever, there's 35 gallons of hydraulic oil just dumped into your ground. And the chemicals they use, occasionally there's spills, not very often, probably just little spills, but we're not even testing the water now for farming. See what kind of runoff's coming out there. So I think the worry about water testing is a little overblown because they're not even checking it now. Actually, it's happening out on the farm. A lot of stuff gets spilled and a lot of stuff is going on to produce the crop. So the water testing thing, I think, yeah, okay, come by after they get it up and running and test the water. It's a good idea, test the ground, make sure there's no contaminants. And there was one other issue that we went over. The setbacks, water testing, and does it matter if it's 80 acres of corn or 80 acres after 3 or 4 or 5 years where you can't even see it, looks like a tree farm? I don't see the difference,
Well, I think that depends on to what degree the screening takes place. It's not typical for screening to occur around a total solar farm. Generally, screening.
Not the ones out, like at the airport in Indianapolis and several other locations I've seen around the country. Yeah, you drive by and you see them. But it's like you're not looking at corn, you're looking at a pretty nice straight rows of glass. It's kind of neat, actually.
I want to respond to your feelings of not needing the additional setback for ditches.
Yeah,
okay.
75 feet should be enough.
Well, out on Wheeling Pike, we currently have a second county-maintained ditch going in alongside of the current county-maintained ditch because farmers believe that they need, they need the old one. They're not willing to abandon the old one due to the economic cost of putting twice the size in. So they're taking pressure off of the old one by installing a new one. And that's occurring right now. You couldn't get that in a 75-foot setback because it's not economically feasible to totally replace a ditch if you still have one that is providing some benefit.
Well, is it a natural waterway? Is one of them a natural waterway or a man-made ditch?
It's a county-maintained covered ditch. We pay assessment and taxes to have the right to those ditches.
Right, but it's a natural waterway?
Sir, it was in there before I was born.
I know, so I'm saying it may be a natural waterway, and those should fall under a totally different set of rules than a man-made ditch.
Well, you'll have to bring that up with the drainage board.
Yeah, because the county, ditches that have been put in by the county, hey, all bets are off. Maintain it how you want to, but natural waterways, that's a little different. You can't just go in there and clear cut it.
This has got to be a county-maintained ditch put in by the county, supported by farmers, paid by farmers on an annual
Right.
tax
I
basis.
pay taxes on it too.
Sure.
And a few years ago, it was a big tax bill.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Randy?
Yes.
May I?
You have to come up.
I would just offer a little bit of additional information on the issue of county drains, ditches, and the like. I sat in a couple of the drainage board meetings where the issue was discussed prior to the proposed amendment to the solar ordinance that the drainage board provided to the commissioners. And I'm failing to remember the gentleman's name now that's on the board, but
Kenny Cates?
Mr. Cates, his son and his family has been involved, as I understand, in doing ditch work throughout the county. And
Be nephew
when the-
Wendell? Nephew Wendell?
Yes, he was a classmate of mine at Marion High School. Anyway, it's a different story. To say ditch is one thing, to say county tile or county drain is another. When the issue was being discussed and prognosticated on with Mr. Cates' input about the width of the setback, information was discussed that a 75-foot setback was not going to be enough in the case where some of the county tiles would have to be excavated and replaced. And if they're moving a lot of dirt, in some cases out in the west part of the county, on one of the tracks where there's a proposed solar development, they're going to have to go down a pretty good ways, fairly wide, moving a lot of dirt. And it was the feeling of the drainage board that there was not enough room in a 75-foot setback for the work that might be necessary on the tiles.
Correct.
Not an open ditch.
Correct.
For what that is worth.
Thank you.
Randy, on tile, they need to keep it 300 feet because there at the dairy, that 15-inch tile, when I put it in, we had to clear a strip wide enough for the ditch machine. And I think it's about 12 feet deep. So we had a lot of dirt to peel out. It takes a lot of room in a field to move that much dirt. Because part of the county I live in, there's low spots and they're hard to drain. You got to cut through hills.
Yeah. In order to get grade, you've got to
grade
move dirt.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, we are moving on. Please, Roy.
So I'm catching up on the subjects that have been covered so far. Obviously on the set aside on the ditches, it seems unreasonable to me, and I believe it's been pointed out that no other county in the state has 150 feet. I wonder how the farmers are going to be compensated for that additional ground that they're going to have to idle. I mean, obviously you guys are doing it for the solar projects to deter the solar companies, but they're just going to exclude that space from their plan, so the farmers are going to bear the cost of that.
It will not be idle, Roy. That's only applies in the event that there's maintenance that needs to be done to that county tile.
If there's a solar farm on there and it's a 150-foot strip, nobody's going to want to farm it, are they, Randy?
We're not talking about that property owner of the solar. We're talking about the other property owners that ditch is servicing, that they're paying county assessment on. The question is, does that solar farm by that owner have a right to impact everybody on the upper side that's receiving benefit from that drainage that they've paid ditch assessment taxes on for years and years and years?
I don't understand how that's gonna impact the difference between 75 and 150. The county commission, the zoning, or I'm sorry, the drainage board is responsible for bidding contractors to go in there. I would think that would be in their specifications. They've got 75 feet to work in. I mean, why is it going to change all of a sudden if they can't bid those jobs out for 75 feet?
I'd say you need to go to a drainage board meeting, right?
You need to go try and fix one. That would solve the problem.
Fixed many of them for a lot of years. Not,
You
and
you haven't fixed very many big ones that was deep.
Yeah, but maybe on county tiles that are managed by the county, but there again.
No, that's my own private tile. It's not a county tile.
Yeah. Anyway, 75 feet. We all know 75 feet should be plenty. It's not reasonable. And there again, the farmers are gonna bear the idling of that
It's
ground.
not idle. They farm over the top of them.
Nobody will farm it. We know that, Randy. All right.
Why wouldn't we?
Water testing, because it's, can you get somebody to run a 150-foot wide strip?
That'd be a 300-foot wide strip.
No, it's 150. It's on 150 on one side.
So that's about 8 passes with a combine.
Could you get somebody to run it? I'll ask you the question.
Yeah, I don't see it being a problem.
All right. Water testing, I'm confused why we're water testing. The EPA said there's no danger on solar panels.
We're not talking about water testing.
I thought that was a subject that was covered earlier.
No, that'll fall under a different category.
All right. Was screening discussed tonight already then?
Nope.
All right. And on your wheeling pike example that you gave with 2 ditches side by side, doesn't have a 75-foot annex on them? So it's already 150 feet wide? If they're side by side, don't both of them already have 75 feet annexed on both sides?
Well, the easement for that doesn't mean that you have to leave that distance unfarmed. That gives the contractor the right to go in and maintain that ditch and have that much area to work within.
All right. So it's already 150 feet if there's 2 of them side by side in between the 2 ditches. Am I missing something?
I don't know that that's declared. I think the 150 feet is in regard to a solar development to have that much room for the contractors to work.
Yeah, well, there again.
It really doesn't apply to an agricultural.
Than down through the middle of Van Buren, for example, or anywhere else where there's any kind of development. So
I encourage you to go to a drainage board meeting, right?
It's in your hands right now, right, Randy?
Only for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any thoughts about height of ground-mounted solar panels? Commission members?
I think probably a bigger fish to fry tonight.
All right, we're going to pass that one. Electrical components, wiring, batteries, inverters, etc. Do we believe we need standards on that? Commission members, before we open it to the public?
What kind of standards were you envisioning?
What kind of standards? I think that's probably falls into a safety category. Are we sure that?
I'm just, and I promise I didn't walk in with an opinion on this one. I'm genuinely asking. Is there something stopping me from filling my shed full of batteries? What's the difference? I guess if they've already, it seems like if they've already leased the land for use of solar power generation and storage, I guess if it's a different site, I suppose if there's a site that's used for batteries and not solar panels already, maybe that would be different. I don't know. I guess
Do you believe that there should be some safety containment of batteries if batteries are installed on solar developments?
I mean, it seems like there already is. I mean, there's already laws about not being able to contaminate water supplies and fire prevention insurance. I mean, maybe there isn't, but it seems like there are existing protections. I can't, I mean, if I have a big old generator or battery to run some of my equipment and it explodes or leaks and I'm responsible, seems like that would be the same. And if we're building water, if we're making all these things for the solar panels, all these cleanliness requirements and setbacks and things, seems like we would just apply the same thing. Why would there be something different, I suppose? I'm not saying
What if there's not?
What if there's not?
Regulations.
I mean, maybe we can just say all the things that apply to solar panels apply to batteries used by solar generation companies. I mean, that works for me.
Do you think it would be safe to say that battery storage for solar development is a new concept? I mean, we know that chemicals on fertilizer plants and so forth have to have containment in the event of a spill. We know that fuel storage tanks have to have containment based on spills, potential for spills. We know that most toxic chemicals have to have a containment. I don't know that there's regulations requiring containment of batteries stored on solar farms.
Does the other counties have anything in there regarding it?
There's counties that have ruled out they're not going to permit batteries on solar developments.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with whatever existing toxic. I'd just be surprised, like kind of like you were saying, I'd be surprised if we didn't already have something that we could just kind of apply. And we can just put that in the solar ordinance.
Right.
And I mean, we could even say yeah, I'm done. I'm just trying to understand the difference, but you're helping me understand.
I believe that it would be our responsibility to make an effort to find out what those regulations are and make sure that they meet whatever standard of safety that we feel is necessary for our county.
Yeah, fire and chemical, like the same as storing gasoline or something. Fire, spillage, yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I've heard that when a solar farm catches on fire, you don't put it out, you let it burn out.
Right.
Then what do you do with the toxic fumes that are being emitted into the air?
Mm-hmm. You evacuate everybody, get Bob Jackson involved.
Yeah.
He might be one you'd want to talk to on the batteries and stuff, on what kind of stuff we deal with.
See, I think
he needs to be involved in that there, and in case there is a fire. If Gas City had a fire, curious to know what caused that solar field. And you wouldn't want to go in there and spray water.
Clayton, I think what we have to come to realize is if it's not written down, it's not going to apply.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because solar developers we're not, as a farmer, I don't do anything more than what I'm required to do, especially if it's not economically feasible for me to do that. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we give consideration to have written down the protections and the safeties that we need to have. And I think that's why we're having, I think that's why it's on the list. At least that was my.
I guess this was my thought. I would be surprised, maybe even disappointed, if Grant County didn't have an existing ordinance about storage of hazardous materials and flammable materials. If we do, it seems like that would apply. If we don't, by all means, let's pass it. And if we need something in addition to the things required for toxic and flammable, maybe even the most toxic and flammable.
Chemtrec has regulations for anybody that handles them. There's regulations that's federal.
Yeah, so I guess it just seems to me like there are ordinances in place. It doesn't have to be a special one for solar. I would hope.
Yeah, you got OSHA to deal with.
OSHA.
Yeah, you gotta. There's regulations the county don't have anything to do with.
Yeah.
They're regulated. Everything goes up, and it's scary if you knew what went up and down the rails and interstate and what traveled right down the bypass.
You also have NFPA, or you have the EPA, you have state IDM I
mean, they're-
Fire marshal's office that has a hazmat division that regulates that type of stuff.
And anybody that has that stuff has to follow their recommendation. I don't think we'd have to really have it in a ordinance. It's already there. And it may be just something we put in there to
Have to follow hazardous.
their recommendations from all these other companies, anything that's hazardous material. And then it'll be limited to how many pounds or that they do have.
So it's already a private.
You'll have to come up, sir. We're not gonna speak for a seat tonight.
Speaking to you on the battery issue, the only time they use store in for private use normally or small generation systems, like there's several houses around here that have rooftop solar panels and they've got a garage full of batteries somewhere already in the county. So I don't know what the rules are for that, but you know, these big producers, like on my place, there'll only be a couple batteries to run their computers and their inverters to change it from the solar panel entry into AC power to send it to the thing. There won't be batteries stored.
Well,
very few anyway, probably.
I do know that adding batteries actually is an important part of making them viable long-term. Because, well, but also, I mean, I think also for the grid, because the issue with solar is peaks and valleys. And if you can spread that out and spread the load over the grid and need capacitors in order to get the phases clean, I mean, there's benefits to having, I'm not just going to take assurances that there won't be batteries. I just feel like we can focus our time on things that are strictly our jurisdiction, strictly applied to solar, when there are things like IDEM and OSHA and hazardous material regulations and things that already exist that would cover us.
There's already 30-some of these solar big ones going on in Indiana. Why can't we go by the state rules and work from that?
And leave it at that. Randy, we just need to put in there that they have to comply with all these other places.
With all the other regulations.
Regulations that are federal.
Assuming that they have those established.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've got, is we need, number one, find out what those regulations are to make sure they're there.
Yeah.
And then just comply with whatever's established.
Whatever, yes.
Yeah, it would be nice, it'd be nice for the public knew what those were, because, you know, they need to buy into the fact that this is what we're looking at.
And see, they're limited to numbers of the pounds. It's like explosives and small ammo. If you're under 500 pounds, 500 pounds less don't have to be placard. When you get over 500 pounds, you can't. And what's weird, when I went through the training, the school bus, if you was hauling kids, you had underneath story, you could haul up to 500 pounds of small ammo with school kids. It does not make sense.
Yeah.
But that's the way it was. Hopefully they have changed that in the last few years.
That's why we want to know what they are, right?
Yes, yes. That just shouldn't happen.
I think if you look at all the additional complexity that a battery farm would bring, that you need to make it a separate ordinance and just concentrate on getting the solar ordinance right. I mean, you're here to protect the people. There's not a requirement that every solar farm needs a battery installation with it.
I really wouldn't think it
It's
would
just
be.
not necessary. So, I mean, in the first step, get a good solar ordinance together and leave the batteries out of it. I mean, there's still a lot to be learned. We've learned quite a bit recently. You read about some of the big mistakes that have been made. They're out in California, where solar farms are being decommissioned and have been. And broken solar panels have been all thrown in the dumps rather than recycling, and they're having problems with the chemicals that are in solar panels leaching out of the dumps, polluting groundwater. That's an issue. You can read about it in the Harvard Business Journal. So there's some things we need to get right, and we don't need to think that everything's covered by somebody else. Thank you.
Mary, is that right?
Oh, it's Kelly.
Kelly,
No problem.
sorry.
Hi, yes.
I won't
Kelly
make that
Pope,
mistake again.
Director of Development with GeneX Solar. Just letting everyone know today, I love the attention that we're getting to this project and to multiple projects in this county. However, I would love to discuss another time that we could address these concerns at a general level. Because there are multiple concerns and multiple misinformation, and the information that is given is misinformation, as I would like to address to the board, but I only have a certain amount of time. So I would love to address this in a 15 or 20-minute presentation at your all's convenience. And go over some of these misinformation or information about our specific projects that's happening in Grant County. Because I do believe that there is some misinformation that is given to our APC board and along with our commissioners. So that's all I wanted to say and give my gratitude to everyone that's coming up and giving their information. But I also would like for us to be able to respond to those information, and I'm not going to do that here because there is just so much. So I wouldn't take your time at this time.
You want to give us an example?
I would give you an example on setbacks, on toxicity. I would give you the example on
Can you say
property rights.
Just say one.
Yeah, toxicity, setbacks.
What's wrong about the setbacks? Is it actually talking about that?
Sorry, am I responding to?
I would ask that. What I was asking is, do you have one example of misinformation that you would like to share with us?
Yes,
that may
toxicity.
encourage the commission to want to take the time to.
Toxicity. I think is a huge issue that people like to reprimand in acknowledging, and there is no toxicity with our panels. They are aluminum and steel driven straight into the ground. There is no concrete around them. There is no toxicity required around found around them. We have studies that have been proven. Trina can speak to some of our more community engagement effects.
Question.
Yeah.
I don't think the toxicity is a concern until the panel has suffered some sort of deformment or breakage. And, I thought a little bit about that, Kelly. And
yeah.
Do you think that we knew that lead paint was going to be a problem back when everybody was painting their homes with lead paint? Do you think that Monsanto knew that Roundup was going to cause lymphomas? I mean, all this stuff has come after the fact, and I think it would be difficult for you to convince us that there is no potential toxicity as new as what industrial solar is.
Oh, great question. So with the panels that have been used in California or in North Carolina and our projects that have been online through GeneX, North Carolina and such, there hasn't been any lead poisoning or lead leaching or any type of poisoning or leaching.
Do you have any development that has incurred a natural disaster where the component of the panel was broken to the point where there could have been leaching? I don't think anybody's going to say that the panel in contact is not designed to leach, but what happens in the effect that the panel becomes
Well, the panel themselves are a part of aluminum, steel, it's not going to be leaching into the ground.
I'm talking about if it's opened,
The
if it breaks.
panel themselves.
The contents of the panel inside of the panel is what our
Yes, we
concern
have
would be.
we have no,
Your panel's not made from the same elements that all other panels are made from?
they are.
Okay.
Solid silica, solids, they're solids.
So the question is,
Do they have cadmium or arsenic?
no,
I would find that interesting. Not at all. I mean, steel and aluminum aren't photovoltaic. I mean, what's the chemical that's photovoltaic? I mean, maybe you're not the correct person to answer this question. I'm sorry that you're on the spot tonight. But that's the concern, is that we build things out of steel and aluminum and they're not photovoltaic. Your panels are photovoltaic. There's something making that. It's not algae and it's not steel and aluminum. What is it?
Silicon.
Silica.
Silicon's not photovoltaic.
They make it out of silica compounds,
that is correct. It is,
and it's solid.
it is through
It's not liquid.
silicon.
We've got a case of misinformation.
I don't believe that, that they would be, what's the concern? That they would be eruption?
If a panel suffered,
Hailstorm. Oh, well, a hailstorm. Okay, so we have taken actually
Texas had a big hailstorm, destroyed a whole bunch of them, and they had broken everything, and they had all that contamination. That was just in the news last year.
yes,
We have hail here.
yes. So
thank you. We're going to try and control here, please.
yeah, we have taken quite a bit of receptors to our solar panels, and that's what I want to get the public aware of is this engagement is, or this solar farm is not engaged on one solar panel. So if one solar panel gets damaged and it is not in its efficiency, it does not damage the entire solar farm array. So this solar farm array covers a large array of areas and many arrays in itself. So if one array gets damaged as part of a lightning strike or a sledgehammer, and we've taken that sledgehammer actually to our array and it didn't damage it. Absolutely. But so these arrays are quite sustainable and would be beneficial to the life of the project throughout the 40-year time span.
Would you agree that about 20,000 solar panels are on an acre in a typical array?
I would agree that is a average amount, but
20,000 per acre.
with efficiency going forward with the lifespan of the project, you can see those numbers diminish because of the efficiency of the panels. So the efficiency of a panel today is the size of this podium, and the efficiency that this podium would do in 10 years will be a tenth of this podium, and it would cause the same efficiency. So that's something else that this efficiency of the lifespan of the project wouldn't go beyond the acreage that we're covering.
Okay. Anything else? We're going to take a 5-minute break, everyone. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Randy, I got some place to be at 8 o'clock. Let me know.
Any input on how we're gonna go from here on, please share. Okay, I think before we get done, we'll organize this one better.
I like what that is. She says that,
This is a public hearing. I think we should skip ahead. Very short day.
Does a wonderful job mowing under their panels. That's Grant does a wonderful job of mowing under their panels. Okay, that stuff has to be buried for them to mow. If it's strung from panel to panel to panel, you can't get between
I guess maybe relative I just don't know how to that's why I'm kind of feeling like it's not productive for me yet. It's good to hear the conversations. It's not maybe this will be
I think the bump in the road is this discussion didn't take place with the first one. It went through 3 amendments, 11 solar company meetings to develop that ordinance. People never had this discussion. And that's what I'm feeling entitled to. These are the issues that people have. We're going to give them the opportunity unless you guys.
So just we're on me. Have a conversation about the excavated part of how it stands right now.
I don't even know that we can clean it. I don't know that you're going to get the people in this county to accept cleaning that.
But your intent though is just to kind of have that conversation about things. It really wasn't to necessarily compare this to what we currently have.
No.
Okay, all right. That makes me feel good.
I don't think
I was thinking
I mean, they took, you gotta keep in mind, they hired 2 lawyers to take the BZA out of it. Okay, they did overlay project in order to take the area planning commission of the BZA out of determining where they went. They took the development plan, which by Indiana code has the sole responsibility of approval from this. They took it away, and they gave themselves the commissioners, because the solar company.
I feel better about that.
The ordinance is supposed to be developed based on the tolerance of the people that live in the tolerance of the people was never heard. We are hearing the tolerance of the people today.
That makes me feel better. I was see, well, I'm not sure where they're looking at. You're just trying to get into it.
And hopefully we'll take this discussion and we'll integrate it. If it doesn't fit into the current ordinance, then we'll create where this fits. We have that power. We have that power. We are in the amendment stages. One of us is saying that he's opposed.
That answers Madison County ordinance not only did list the discussion items that we did in that meeting that you might have been in, that first application meeting, where we decided what was an ordinance and what's an application item, sure, things from that public that day. And then I pulled things from the Madison County.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry, thank you.
This was done before the one that I called that meeting.
Actually,
Which apparently was getting along with Bob. Yeah, I'm sure the application meeting followed our APC meeting, and he was taking places.
Not so much thousands, but it was
to my level of professionalism. And I'll get to it. Early in my career, I had a couple of matches told to keep me up. And I promised to myself I would never do that. All right, in 5 minutes, John. All right, we're going to go here at 8 o'clock, and I'm going to end this pretty soon. And I'm going to give Jim the opportunity to talk, and I'm going to give David the opportunity to talk or go home. And I think we'll make some decisions before we leave based on David's recommendations, how we want to do some of the stuff.
Yeah, there needs to be, my break would visit categories. Priorities.
Yes. And to be honest with you, I didn't want to do this without you guys' input. So we will leave tonight with your input on how we want to categorize this stuff. And I can make recommendations.
So they can discuss it.
Randy, sometimes there needs to be a committee of.
Well, I know, but I try not to do that, and I can be. But she voluntary. I can be. I know the heavies are
Every committee needs a member, there's too many.
I know that safety is going to be an issue. I know property value guarantees is going to be an issue. We really
really need to deal with decommissioning because I'm thinking to the next generation that's gonna have to take these things and clean them up. And if we don't have inflationary factors built in what it's gonna take to get rid of these panels when they're done, the county's gonna
It's
eat
gonna
that.
go up. What it costs us right now is
That's why we need an inflationary figure based on decommissioning, so the taxpaying county doesn't have to pay to get rid of this stuff, because the landowner's gonna file bankruptcy, he's gonna walk away, the solar company's gonna walk away, and here we got an eyesore stuck in Grant County, what are we gonna do?
They need to purchase a bond.
They're gonna purchase a bond, but I want an inflationary clause in decommissioning, so as prices go up.
We need an inflation protected bond. You can get inflation protected.
Yes, that's where I'm at. All right, we're ready. Gonna bring this meeting back to order.
Randy, can I speak?
When everybody gets back in here, I will let you speak, Andy. And Tom wants to speak. You know, Tom was up first, Andy. Can I let Tom go first? Because he was standing there before I called this.
I agree with that. Tom, you have the floor.
My name's Tom Richards. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just want to make a comment on, they were talking about fire that could happen into a solar farm. I talked to a local fire chief and just asked him some questions about that. One of the things that he did mention was the fact that they are not equipped to fight a fire. They're not trained. From my understanding from him, it's just, they would just try to maintain the fire, but I mean, you take a solar project that's 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 acres, I mean, that fire would be astronomical, where the heat would be so great that they wouldn't even be able to even get halfway close to water. Don't put it out. I mean, they don't even have the chemicals to fight that fire, and so it was just a concern for him. And I just want to make this comment that what he was stressing earlier.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, yes, Andy.
Yeah, and it's tough to not speak on every item, so I really just want to get, because we're really getting off tangent. The question was electrical components, and should that be in the ordinance? And I think wiring, inverters, those type of things absolutely should be in the ordinance. I mean, I think you said, Randy, if it's not written down, it's not as good as the paper it's written on. So you've got to have documentation to support exactly what, if you're going to build a house, you have a certain type of parameters of what you got to have in order to build that house. That's quite different than this industrial solar location. Those things, inverters, I mean, an inverter turns DC into AC and injects it into the power line. And it makes a lot of noise. You would not want this thing sitting next to your house. It would absolutely drive you nuts. So these things really need to be put in a location, probably surrounded. Wiring, is it above ground, is it below ground? Where are the poles at? Are there poles? Those things need to be defined. And I think that's what you were getting at. So I think that I'm just one voice saying that it really needs to be documented. Virtually all of these things need to be addressed and we shouldn't push it off on, well, there's something else. Yes, IDEM, for instance, IDEM does test water quality and things like that, if you call them out, but they're probably checking for E. coli. They're not checking for cadmium. So I think it's important to recognize that there's a difference. So yes, these things need to be addressed. It needs to be well defined. That's the whole point of having an ordinance. And ordinances are different depending on what the application is. So anyway, these items almost across the board should be in there. They should be addressed and they should be identified on exactly what the parameters are. Because we all know, I mean, kids, if they don't have boundaries, they'll do whatever they can get away with.
This is not gonna be any different. So, thank you for your time.
Okay, commission members, any, in a response to that in regard to the items we've discussed to this point, whether they need to be considered to be in the ordinance or not?
You know, Randy, if these inverters, if they're so noisy, shouldn't they be in a building that's insulated so you don't hear them? Soundproof them? That's being out in the open?
I think they have to be positioned in the solar development to provide the least amount of distraction that they can cause, you know, to adjoining property owners and residents. Yes, so I think that becomes a setback issue or positioning where they can go in order for that. Now, are there regulations that would require them? Possibly.
Well, I think if you're gonna.
Do they generate heat? Do they need to be cooled? I don't.
They generate a lot of heat, and if you're possibly gonna have a fire, there's where your fire possibly will come from. And if you put them in a building and you kind of halfway fireproof it and soundproof it, where if you have a problem, it'll be contained and not spread out through the solar field and get it on fire. But the inverters will get hot.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than a battery charger. You know, when you put it on boost, how hot your cables get. An inverter will be the same way.
Can I speak again?
You'll have to come up.
No problem. I got a couple miles left in it. All this talk tonight about what we should do or shouldn't do or ought to do, there's got to be state law already on this issue. Why don't we have a copy of how the state says we ought to do it?
Okay, to help you with my understanding of ordinances, we cannot do anything less than what the state requires us to do.
Right.
But we can exceed the state's regulations if we choose. Jim, is that correct?
I've only dealt with the code side of state agencies.
You are.
When like, if you're gonna write an ordinance, you can be more stringent than the state code. You just can't be less than what the state code is.
That's my point.
So
there's already several counties do it. Couldn't we ask them to send some information that they've used to get this going? I mean, it would be a reference for you all to decide what you want to pick and choose from, along with the state law.
Well, I'll need the inverters, the ones I've seen, and I've seen the solar field down at MoDOC and the ones on the west side of the state. And they're just sitting there.
Yeah, well, the same thing at the substation. Those are transformers. They're just sitting out there in the open. They don't really make any noise. I've never heard them, but the power transmission lines, the big ones, you can hear them humming.
They hum a little bit.
Yep, on a good high demand. Okay, I suggest just getting some examples from the state and the other counties that are doing it and work off of that.
Appreciate your input.
Let you listen to what this here inverter sounds like. All day long.
What are we listening to? What is this?
This is an inverter.
Oh, an inverter, okay.
All day long.
They need to be enclosed.
Whether it's 100 feet away or 200, you never hear it.
And to be a fireproof building. I mean, because that's what catches on fire.
Okay, so, Roy?
Yeah, electrical components in the ordinance is what we're discussing. So you're gonna put in the ordinance what components have to be installed at the facility, back to Clayton's issue. Why would you put anything in the ordinance as far as what equipment's required? I can understand getting it documented when the installation goes in and perhaps being part of the application, what they're gonna use, but I don't understand at all why it would be in the ordinance. You don't have anybody with the expertise to put it in there. You'd have to maintain it. It shouldn't be in the ordinance. This is, I don't understand what we're doing here.
Clayton.
Yeah, I mean, when I made my comment, I was specifically talking about batteries. Seems to me the issue is the same as any toxic or flammable storage. We can apply whatever that is to that. Wiring, that's a question we haven't had. That's a good question. Are there poles? Are they above ground, below ground? Seems like that needs to be discussed. Inverters, yeah, they're loud. Do we have rules if just a normal power plant? I mean, coal burning power plants generate DC and it has to be changed into AC to go to the grid. What's our rules for inverters for that? Can we use the same one? Can we copy and paste? So yeah, I think these three examples, we handle them different, is my thing.
Commission members, anything else before we move on to Ed? Ed.
Okay, on electrical components, batteries, I'd recommend excluding inverters. I'd recommend putting in the middle of the solar farm and fully encapsulating them in soundproof, fireproof building. Wiring, I'd recommend underground. It's very doable. You go down to Madison County and you look at all those windmills, the wire's all under the ground. You don't see a bunch of poles running windmill to windmill or anything like that. Seems like that would look better. You don't see above ground wiring in Washington, D.C. You don't see above ground wiring in nice housing subdivisions. It's very doable to put it underground. Yeah, it costs a little bit more, but it's all on what you want things to look like when you're done.
All right, we, I believe, are going to end there with the list. And what I'd like the commission members to do is to help me decide where we want to go forward with this, considering Mr. Glickfield's recommendations to group some of these together and create public hearings. Comments, commission members? Are we good with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. David, give me that proposal again.
So I suggest maybe, I had them in basically 3 groups of all the items on here. And roughly they're evened out issue-wise. One of them I had 10, one of them I had 6, and one of them I had 7. And then you've got, I consider, just from, again, listening to all the public input over this process, at least 5 very large issues, which are going to be major policy issues, which might take some more debate on. And so I had pre, post, and then mechanical, operational. And then the major issues for the countywide cap, in other words, how many acres could be used. Then I had the water issues. I call it watershed studies, but really it's the safety water issues. I think that's really important. And I think the setbacks, then the decommissioning process, and then finally the property value guarantees. And maybe discuss a couple of those at each one of these meetings, maybe put a couple of them in the pre, a couple of them in the post. And then the last remaining one, put in the mechanical, operational. And then have that list available to the public ahead of time so they can come prepared to discuss those specific issues. That way we're not bouncing all over the place. We're focused on a certain group, and a lot of it will tie in together based on how I've broken them down. I won't bore you with reading them all out, but I'll give you that, how I broke them down afterwards, if you agree.
Okay, commission members, are we okay with allowing that organization to occur, and then we can disseminate that to you folks as soon as we can get it together? Katie can put that together for us, and then we'll get it out, and we'll put that on the website so the public will know that it's coming their way. Anybody opposed to that? Okay. All right. Okay. Let's do directors and Mr. Glickfield's report. And then we'll go into a small segment of public input and we're gonna go home.
Would you like me to start with my report?
Please.
Since I missed first. We haven't been doing much in court. Of course, there's been a transition operational wise, so I anticipate that's taking a little bit of time. So we have not been to court, at least in the past month. The other thing I was gonna mention, you took care of already with the resolution for the Robert's Rules of Order. I believe we're at resolution number 2. So I'll have that sample ready for everyone to view that evening. But it'll basically be just a resolution which will have this exhibit you have attached as an exhibit, as an operational thing. You know, I think that's very helpful.
Now, we need to have discussion, make any possible changes to it before that resolution? Do you want to see a final copy before the resolution, or are you able to?
I can have a sample ready and we can adjust it however, and then if it's good the way it is, and take a vote that night. If it needs change, I can change it and we can come back and next meeting and formalize it.
Okay, and you guys have a copy that's got red on it, right? Those are some things that the BZA chose to discuss as to whether they wanted to leave them, change them, or what they want to do. So that's what that red is about. That's the result of some BZA discussion. Not that we have to follow that, but at least it gives us some ideas where there were some concerns expressed. Okay.
The resolution itself, I doubt there would be much debate over. It's the actual exhibit where the debate would come into play.
Okay. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Mr. Strauss.
So the one and only thing I really wanted to talk about tonight was about a week or so ago, I sent out a floodplain ordinance. And I tried to get it out to everybody on the board here. I sat down with DNR, their water department, a few weeks ago. We sat down and we talked about, the different things that are going on statewide versus what's going on here in Grant County. We did have an issue with training, but I've already attended all the training that the state requires me to have. They did suggest that I go out to the National Fire Academy for a week-long program out there, but that's probably nothing that I'm gonna be able to get to this year. But the floodplain ordinance, it has language in there that the state would like us to adopt. So I sent that out to everybody to get your input. If you're okay with that, that's great. If there are things in there that you don't like or you think we should address further, then we'll need to discuss that. But it's language that they put in place to where it benefits everyone that has to have flood insurance for their homes. There's a section in there about, people who build in a floodplain. Well, we would never issue a permit for building in the floodplain, but there have been a few issues in the past where, there were permits issued in a floodplain and there was a difference between the federal map and the state DNR map.
Are those corrected at this time?
They are corrected at this time because we do a dual layer with our permitting software and it shows both of those maps so that we can say, okay, this is something that we'll have to notify DNR on. But I realized that was like a 38-page ordinance.
I started on it, I didn't get it finished.
Same here.
Yeah, there's a lot in that ordinance, but they're trying to get this county by county by county. The floodplain maps change every once in a while. So I will make sure that we stay on top of that so we don't run into any other issues. But for our discussion tonight, if anybody has started reading that ordinance, if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email and ask, section whatever, and I'll try to do the research with state DNR and then get back to you.
Do you think there's parts of that ordinance that may come to our attention or our table, Jim, that you would like to share with us?
So without sitting down and reading the whole ordinance, and then I'm like probably everybody else in the room, I've started into it, but I haven't digested enough to say, okay, this is what I'm really concerned about. I've glanced through it and I've read part of it. I don't think there's anything that I've read so far that would give me a lot of heartburn. But I'm the person who has to enforce it, so.
Okay. Well, when you're ready to put it on the agenda of a regular meeting, we'd be happy to entertain that whenever you think that we're ready to
Well,
go.
and the problem with state DNR is we have to discuss it here, and before we can go through the process of the commissioners, the council, whoever approves it, we have to send a copy to the state first for their approval to say, this is what we plan on adopting, and have them go through it and say, okay, we would like you to add this, or we would like you to subtract that.
Who authored the document you sent out to us?
State DNR.
Okay, because you said you hadn't read it all yet. I assumed you were on it before it came out to us, so.
No, I sat down with her a couple of weeks ago and she handed me this 38-page document.
Right.
She sent it to a bunch of folks in the email. So I went ahead and forwarded what I had looked at. I forward that out to everybody to get their input. I can probably get something together and we can talk about it at the October meeting.
Yeah, I started reading through it too, and it seemed pretty cut and dried and straightforward what I'd read so far. But if there's something specific that you want to draw to our attention, do that, because I want to make sure that there's a question in your mind that we're looking at that as well.
The only thing that I saw in there that we may have heartburn about, and I need to discuss it with my staff, because I don't know what the other ordinances in the county are, but say somebody builds in a floodplain without a permit, there's a section of that ordinance that would allow us to charge them up to $1,000 for doing that. I don't know if that's overly necessary or if that's too low of an amount. I think we need to discourage people from trying to build into a floodplain. So there are certain things in there that I need to go by and just do a checklist, sit back down with my contacts from DNR.
Well, I guess I would ask that as you do that, and there are issues that you think you want to draw our attention to, that do that, so we're aware of it.
Okay.
So Jim, prior to your coming, we had a couple situations with floodplain, which I think is what brought the attention to us in this county. Do we know what the status of that is? I mean, are there exceptions that can be made if somebody chooses to build in a floodplain without permission?
No. Building in floodplain without any type of permitted permission is the state can come in and literally tear it down. So let's say you add on to your house and the addition is in a floodplain, and that addition costs more than half the value of the original house. So you go ahead and do it. You didn't do it. You didn't get a permit. The state government can come in and say, tear it down.
No grandfathering in the event that that original structure was in that floodplain?
If the original structure was in a floodplain, yes, but there's only certain criteria that you can repair your house or add on to the house that has already been in a floodplain. There's just a split narrative there that you can do that. It has a lot to do with the value of the original house, and a lot to do with the value of what you're remodeling or what you're adding on to. But still, that requires us to get a permit. It requires them to get a permit from us, and we have to submit that to DNR.
Okay.
Because DNR will get involved in anything being built in that floodplain.
Okay, so it'd be our responsibility to report to the DNR in the event that we discover that something has been violated.
Because if it's a commercial property, when you apply for a CDR, which is a construction design and lease through the state, if it's a commercial property, there's a section on that application that asks, are you in a floodplain? And if you lie, they will fine you for that.
Okay. All right, anything else? Katie, anything to share? You've been a trooper for us.
Nope, I'm still trucking along.
Okay. Anything else, Jim?
No.
All right, we will take about 5 minutes of any public input general discussion. 5 minutes. Keep it short, please.
Hi, Bill Creech from Marion, Indiana. Just had just a couple quick comments. Number one, when you start hearing the word disinformation or misinformation, who decides on what that? And I just caution with that. And when they start saying sources or studies funded by who? And that's all I want to say on that. And the other thing is, just want to kind of caution of what might have happened in the past of having private meetings. And it seems like wanting to meet privately with members of this team and not in an open forum so I can clarify what misinformation and disinformation is being passed around. I think that's something that really needs to be take caution.
Jim, we pledge to transparency, and unless it's an executive session, the public is invited to all meetings.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. When I hear that, I just think, well, trying to get a person involved in an individual meeting. So, and I know I'm not questioning your integrity or anybody's integrity. The invitation was there, and sometimes that can be tempting. That's all I have to say. So.
Thank you. One more, please. One more.
If you don't know my name by now, it's Michael Lee. I would second what Mr. Creech said. And I'll also add to that, when I realize the commission is trying to garner as much information and understanding on a number of very significant points, a very long list of significant points, I would encourage the commission members to keep in mind who has standing before this commission, be that Grant County residents that are concerned about the protection of our resources and our assets. The other thing I would offer is, as I said, you have a very long list. I'm mindful that 6 months is a very short period of time, and I would ask the commission if you're going to give consideration to a couple of special meetings or scheduling of a number of public hearings here in an accelerated format so that we can work our way through the number of points that are on this list and the solar ordinance, because it is extensive, and ensure that we give it timely and due consideration of all subjects, and work within the 6 month period that we're cognizant that the ordinance is being reviewed. Thank you.
All right, in closure, we will follow Mr. Glickfield's recommendation in organizing the things on the list to create some meetings, and we will post those as quickly as we can put that together. So please attend to the website. Katie will put it up there as soon as we get it together. I want to thank everyone for coming. Appreciate your input. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
See you later.